By far the most important thing today, not only today, but in a historical perspective, the most important thing is to make sure that a militant regime, a militant Islamic regime or a militant Islamic movement does not get its hands on the weapons of mass destruction.
Iran vows to help Syria reconquer Israel's northern Golan Heights region. In a meeting between Syria's ambassador to Iran, Adnan Mahmoud, and Tehran's Chief Justice, Ibrahim Raisi, the latter pledged to ratchet up his country's support for active resistance, as he put it, while further insisting that Israel is perishable. The top Iranian justice further noted, according to the regime-controlled Tasnim news agency, that Damascus and Tehran must bolster their cooperation to accelerate the demise of Israel, which he referred to as the fake Zionist regime.
I say to the Israeli army on the border, from tonight stand guard and wait for us. Wait for us 1, 2, 3, 4 days. Wait for us.
Israel continues to prepare its northern front for a prospective war likely to erupt in the coming years. Speaking at an inauguration ceremony for a new resilience center established for the purpose of preparing civilian frontline communities for days of battle, Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz emphasized that the relative quiet maintained across Israel's north remains accompanied with faded echoes of what will inevitably revert into an enhanced reality.
A dangerous back and forth rapidly developing in the Middle East. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu laying the blame squarely on Iran for an explosion that hit an Israeli-owned cargo ship last week in the Gulf of Oman. The Israeli-owned MV Helios Ray cargo ship was attacked last week with mines attached to the ship by a fast-working IRGC commando unit. Or at least so says Hebrew media Monday morning, contradicting earlier speculations that the explosion in the Gulf of Oman was the work of a missile.
Tensions are seemingly escalating on Israel's northern front with both Lebanon and Syria. Less than 48 hours after an IDF surveillance drone crashed inside Lebanese territory on Sunday, an uncommon incident occurred when surface-to-air missiles were fired toward an Israeli unmanned aerial vehicle, a Hermes 450, which was conducted routine activity in Lebanese airspace south of Sidon. It is important to highlight that Israel's preparations for a probable impending escalation comes at a time when the economic and social disarray within neighboring Lebanon is seemingly deteriorating from bad to worse. With social and political instability amid deep-rooted corruption and forced ramifications of the corona crisis, alongside foreign interference from the East, Beirut's economy plunged into its worst state of array since the country's bloody civil war of the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. The Iranian chief negotiator further revealed that the United States had already offered an initial proposal for Iran to suspend its enrichment of uranium to 20% fissile purity in return for the release of $1 billion. However, Tehran rejected Washington's offer, reiterating that unless the US lifts all sanctions against it, the Islamic Republic will continue to abide by its own interests vis-à-vis its nuclear program. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu urged world powers, including the United States in particular, not to return to the 2015 nuclear deal, which the Israeli leader labeled as dangerous. And while Jerusalem and Moscow are evidently in disagreement on ways to deal with the Iranian threat, in light of respective national interests, Lavrov highlighted his country's proposed initiative to launch a regional security forum that would be inclusive of all neighboring countries in the Middle East.
Мы привлекли внимание к российской инициативе, которая уже хорошо всем известна, о формировании системы коллективной безопасности в районе Персидского залива и с возможным включением соседних стран.
In parallel, Netanyahu stressed Israel will continue to take action against the fanatical regime in Iran based on a core principle which guides the Jewish state. Israel warns Iran's Lebanese proxy Hezbollah of heavy consequences if it would attempt to challenge the security of the Jewish state.
Hezbollah launched a drone into Israeli airspace. The IDF took it down. Is that a precursor, perhaps, of more attacks or more airspace infiltrations to come?
Well, Jeff, the IDF is definitely preparing constantly for that eventuality.
Israeli Air Force aircraft struck batteries of Syria's aerial defense array overnight in a retaliatory response for an errant surface-to-air missile that penetrated Israeli airspace, of which debris landed in the northern part of the southeastern Negev region. The incident occurred at approximately 35 minutes after 1 a.m. last night, when unidentified aircraft reportedly struck warehouses believed to be weapons caches of Iranian proxy militias on the Syrian side of the Golan Heights.
What happens at this battle when they come against Israel?
Well, first understand that there's no possibility that Israel could defend itself against this massive army. When God takes this army out, God's going to give a tremendous witness to himself.
Yeah, he says, all the nations will know that I am God.
That's right. And probably many people will convert to Christ as a result of that. Ezekiel says it happens in the latter days or the last days. So it's in very close connection with the tribulation period.
And in the meantime, I can assure you, the Bible always perfectly coincides with reality. God's Word clearly teaches that the world will grow worse and worse and plunge into apostasy and darkness at the time of the Great Tribulation and the horror of Antichrist rule. The world has always been a dangerous place, and this is no surprise to anybody who understands Bible prophecy. But in the midst of all the end-time pressure, Israel will become a nation of light bearers that God had always intended for Israel to be. And through the nation of Israel, gospel truth will reach the furthest corners of the world.